Today we have Dr. Lexi Lane, and she is going to talk about all sorts of fiber and how it helps your gut.
Okay, alrighty. So I'm Dr. Lexi Lane, and thank you guys so much for coming out. We finally have a nice cooler-ish morning, right? Kind of. Anyway, so I'm a naturopathic doctor. If anyone doesn't know what that is, I was trained like a primary care physician, but my approach is ideally a non-pharmaceutical approach, using food as medicine where possible. And so that's kind of me in a nutshell. I actually practice down the street in Davidson, and I've been volunteering to come and talk with Walk with the Doc. This is a really great organization. So thank you for coming out, and let's talk about fiber. And so we all know fiber essentially for pooping, right? So hopefully we've all had a good rock star stool today. Rock star stools, we describe those as nice long tubes. They're nice castings of the intestines. They're easy to pass. They're well formed. They don't look like rabbit pellets. They don't look like frozen yogurt. And they shouldn't be one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, you know, so foul odor, okay? No, it's not potpourri, but you know, it shouldn't be so foul stinking that it's really, really upsetting people, okay? So fiber plays a role in healthy rock star stools, but fiber also plays a role in other really valuable things too. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the differences between soluble fiber and insoluble fiber, but hopefully bringing home a little small message of what whole foods are as opposed to not whole foods. So I've used fiber as the example, and I'm going to sprinkle in some ideas on how to think about what a whole food is and what that means as opposed to processed foods. And then the final thing that I wanted to get you guys to think about is that fiber goes beyond just, you know, the stooling piece, but it's a binder. And so binding excess cholesterol, it binds toxins. When we we have hormones, but when we're done with our hormones, we're supposed to be breaking those hormones down and pooping them out and peeing them out. Otherwise, we get things like estrogen dominance. So we want fiber for, yes, the stooling piece, but in helping of the elimination of things that need to get out of our system so that it's not parking itself in our joints as toxins, and then in our fat cells, okay? So fiber's a binder. And the last thing I want to say is that fiber feeds our microorganisms, our gut bacteria. So again, beyond just the stooling piece, we actually have various species of bacteria, and there's research into various species have different types of digestive enzymes, like we have our own digestive enzymes. Well, we actually don't break down fibers really well, so they actually stay in the gut. And some of those non-digestible fibers is what our gut bacteria actually feeds on. So have you guys ever seen FOS on your probiotics? You guys seen that, FOS? Okay, well if you have a probiotic and you have F as in frog, O as in opal, and S as in Sam, it's called fructooligosaccharides. FOS is fiber. It's non-digestible fiber that is actually food to our good bacteria, and that would be kind of called a prebiotic. Okay, so if you're going to say probiotic or a prebiotic, the pre is that FOS, those fibers feeding the organism. And then the other thing I wanted to say is that different bacteria in our gut are going to feed on different types of fibers, which actually encourages a variety. So if you're eating the same thing day in and day out, you want to actually have a different vegetable a week. Like I like to go to the grocery store and sometimes buy an unusual vegetable that I have never cooked with before, because the different types of fibers from different types of foods are going to be feeding different types of species in our gut. So a variety of food and different fibers feeds and supports biodiversity in our guts. All right. So do you guys have questions so far? No? Okay, we have apparently an agitator in the crowd, so I thought I'd give him that opportunity. Yeah. That was your moment. That was one opportunity. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. So what we have here is on this side of the table is going to be our soluble fibers. So things that whenever we put it in water, it's going to absorb the water. And then we have insoluble fibers over here. So we've got flaxseed, hemp seeds, nuts, potatoes, Brussels sprouts. That's beets. So your starchier vegetables are going to be more of your insolubles, and then the less starchy vegetables are going to be your soluble fibers. But you're going to see that in foods, like if you go on the Google and you start searching for, okay, what foods are soluble fibers and what foods are insoluble, you're going to find that foods sit on both sides of the spectrum. So I have chia seeds as my example today on what that looks like. And at the end of this presentation, I'm going to actually add water. So it's pretending this is us hydrating. And we've eaten our lovely oats over here, and maybe we sprinkle some nuts and seeds in. So we're going to add water to each of these, and I'll stir them, and we can see what happens when the fiber gets introduced to the water instantaneously. And we'll go for a walk, and we'll come back, and you can see the differences between soluble, insoluble, and then foods that have a little bit of both properties in them. Okay, so with soluble fiber, here we've got, lentils, we've got beans, seeds, psyllium husks. So this is just you guys, you can just buy this over the counter. It's a 100% psyllium husk, and a lot of times with cleanses that you'll see, they'll say, oh, take psyllium husk, a tablespoon 4 times a day to bind to the toxins and get them out. They want you to poop. That's why it's called a detox, right? Anyway, so you'll see that sometimes they'll include colon cleanses into detoxes online, and so I just wanted to show you what that is. But it's psyllium husk. We have here beans, so black beans and garbanzo beans. Now, what's funny?
It's kind of, I love things like that.
You're probably thinking, okay, the tooting, because gosh, Brussels sprouts, boy, that causes some tooting. Well, sometimes the microorganisms in our GI are gas producing, and so they're feeding on those fibers, right? And so they're kind of going a little crazy, and sometimes you can get a little bloated with these foods. But one thing I wanted to talk about was using this as a representation of whole foods versus not whole foods. So for example, black beans, so this is just straight up black beans in a can, but you can buy, dried beans, just kind of like this in little packages. But if you have black bean dip, whole food or not whole food, the moment you start cutting a food and putting it into a blender, it's becoming processed. So technically, black bean dip is not a whole food, it's more processed. Now, if we're going to talk about a spectrum of foods, we have got this black bean spaghetti here. And to get from a whole black bean to black bean spaghetti, it's a lot of processing that has to go through with that, right? So this is a processed food of black beans. Another example might be, we already ate all of our apples, so I don't have any apples on the table, but an apple. Okay, you have an apple, applesauce. Is the applesauce whole food or processed? It's technically processed.
Does it make any difference?
What?
Does it make any difference whether it's processed or not?
It does, because with the applesauce, you're taking away the outside fibers of the apple, and the outside fibers of the apple provide a different type of fiber than just the fleshy part of the fruit, and you want the whole fruit. Now, applesauce is fine, but I would combine applesauce with some nuts and seeds to kind of slow down the fructose in the applesauce that the shell of the apple would already be doing. Does that make sense?
Well, does that apply to like black beans, or say refried beans or refried black beans?
Yeah. So, in terms of the spectrum of processed, in terms of refried beans or hummus or black bean dip, it's fine to do that. But when we started getting into the further process, so let's just say, this is a lentil soup, but if I bought a can of lentil soup that's got vegetables in there, whereas I would be throwing in fresh carrots, the canned lentil soup is not going to have the nutrient density and the nutrient value as making it whole and fresh. And then secondly is that when the more processed you get, the more you're going to start getting additives and things in your food. And I apologize I didn't bring a couple of examples so you could actually see. But you start getting more and more ingredients that you're not really going to care to have in your gut or in your body, the more processed a food is, like pizzas and things like that. And again, you can have these things, but having, an 80% whole food diet, I just you know, we hear that, and I wanted to bring home that message of what that actually means. And then also, but doing that using fiber as the example. So if you're gonna have a whole food diet, making things on your own, although in society that's really not very realistic, so we pick our battles, right? But it is better to have the whole apple versus the applesauce, if that makes sense. Okay. Another thing I was going to say is that, you know, all right, an apple flavored Jolly Rancher, you know, okay, that's an extreme. Okay, processed or whole, right? Okay, so that is clearly a processed food. Just because it has the word apple on it does not mean that, oh, I'm getting a fruit. All right, so there's just kind of your example of extremes. And so like hummus, black beans, applesauce, things that are 100% that ingredient, it's fine. And like if you're gonna choose a black bean spaghetti, that's okay. But there are these extreme examples of processed foods that you just have to think about in terms of, is it better for me to just make this on its own? I'll put a little side note, this is not fiber, but cheese. It's better to buy the block of cheese and just shred it on your own than it is to buy the shredded cheese. The shredded cheese is the processed version of the block cheese. And they're adding in anti-caking agents into that package. And so those anti-caking agents are kind of toxic to our bodies, okay? So the more processed a food is, the more broken down it is in a packaged form, that can be a little bit more problematic for our bodies because it doesn't recognize it as well. And then the beauty of having a whole food, there's a God within the vegetable, and with, you know, when you provide it, it's packaged in such a way that's balanced with the different types of fibers and the different micronutrients that when we start to break them down, they get stripped of those things. Kind of like still rolled oats versus just oatmeal, right? The still rolled oats is kind of the whole fibrous heart of the grain. Yep, gold star. as opposed to just oatmeal, all right? Which is why still rolled oats are so much longer to cook, because you have to break those things down. And anyway, so that's just another example. So soluble fibers, we'll just classify seeds into that. Yes, chia seeds, it's, you know, kind of debatable. Lentils, beans are part of that. So like if you guys have ever made beans from scratch and you soak them overnight, have you guys done that? Okay, if you've soaked your beans, you'll notice, where did all the water go? The beans are pulling in the water, they're soaking it up, which makes it soluble, okay? If the water just stayed out in the pot, then that's insoluble. Make sense? Okay. All right, and then so in our insoluble section, I'm gonna classify nuts. So seeds we'll put on in the soluble side, and then the insoluble as the nuts category, starchy veggies. Whole grains are part of that too. Yeah, and oh, by the way, I have a list on the table of kind of a chart with some different examples of soluble and insoluble fibers and what foods those are. So you guys have a nice little cheat sheet you can pick up after the presentation. We want soluble fiber, so it's going to be pulling in the water. Really great for loose stool and diarrhea. Okay, so if you have more of that kind of picture, you know someone who does, that you might want to give them some psyllium husk. If someone is more constipated, we want kind of the insoluble fiber, because we want it to keep the water out of this like packing in of the stool, and you're going to kind of see what that happens there. The insoluble fiber keeps the bowel moving, so it keeps you going, which is also why we want to hydrate, because dehydration is one of the contributing factors to constipation. So part of insoluble fiber is to draw in, not necessarily draw in water into its substance, but more water is attracted to it, but it doesn't stay in, it doesn't get into the bolus. That's why I have examples. You'll understand what I mean in a minute. The other thing too is soluble fiber. The soluble fibers are usually your binders, so that's where you're really going to sweep up the carbohydrates and fats. So you're not getting these huge sugar swings. So it's really nice to combine fiber to a sugary type of fruit, we'll say, because it's going to slow down that fructose. If you're going to have cake or some sort of dessert that's high in sugar, think about adding a fiber or some sort of nut and seed or something to that cake, so that we're slowing down the sugar spike. Great for diabetics. and then people with high cholesterol by adding in the fiber that's binding to the excess cholesterol. So we want that as well. All right, so what I'm gonna do is there's about 2 tablespoons of psyllium husk fiber, chia seed, and flaxseed in these jars. And then what I'm gonna do is add about 2.5. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna do this. So add water there.
So are peanut M&Ms better than M&Ms?
Exactly.
Actually, yes.
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 Just saying.
It is. Yes. Yes.
Hershey's chocolate with nuts in it.
Ted, I just thought I'd take some pressure
No,
off.
take-
Thank you.
I have
I
a
was
problem.
waiting for the chocolate to get into the discussion.
Yes. So chocolate covered almonds.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Connie. You're welcome.
Yeah. But
We all
that
want to know.
but that concept is exactly what we're trying to take home. So if you're gonna have your bad stuff, have it with some fiber.
Now, if you take all of this and make a smoothie out of all of this,
Yeah.
is that just as good, or are you losing
Oh,
something there?
okay. So that's a really great question. All right. So you're already kind of starting to see that. Well, you guys can come and take a look at these jars, but it'll be more fruitful after the presentation. But if you guys want to just don't drop the glass jar, please. Okay.
Yeah, it's touching that water.
Yeah.
Give it to
Don't drink it. Now, what am I supposed to do?
Just so you can
Just
observe.
add a little alcohol and
So you
go
can start observing.
Pour this water, I guess. Yeah, make
What, yeah. So what you're doing is you're observing. Yeah, this is the conklin. So what you're holding there is soluble fiber, and if you spin it around in the jar, it's pretty, kind of starting to get mushy.
Almost like applesauce.
Yeah, it's kind of like applesauce. Yeah.
Whereas that one is not.
And then your flaxseed is a good example of insoluble fiber.
It's already.
I've always read that it's better to grind the flax seed than you get more benefit, but
Yeah.
that would be processed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, so a couple of questions came here, and that was, first of all, the smoothie. So smoothies versus juicing. It's one thing I want to say. So with a smoothie, you're putting the whole vegetable in, the whole fruit in, and you're just shoving it in, and it's blending, and so the fibers of the vegetables and fruits are part of the juices that the fruit and the vegetable provides. So you're getting still the whole food. Yes, it's technically processed, but it actually is broken down for you, and it's a lot easier to digest. So people who are having some digestive issues, doing things like smoothies can be nice. Juicing strips you of the fibers, which is why you see all the fibers going out this way, and then the juice is there. The value in that is going to be for somebody who we're really trying to get them to absorb the micronutrients, the minerals, and the vitamins fast. So, and that's one of the arguments against juicing, because you get one of these sugar spikes. So with juicing, you really only want to use maybe one fruit and predominantly vegetables. And I kind of use that same ratio with smoothies as well, because smoothies that are just loaded in fruit, you can do that, but it's not as well-rounded. We'll say it's more encouraged. We'll say to include vegetables into your smoothie, because the veggies are going to be providing a different type of fiber, but also you're not getting all that fructose and all that sugar. And then with the juicing, again, one fruit for sure, but you are going to miss the fibers from that. And then the other question of, ground seeds versus whole seeds. So when you go to the grocery store, it's better to buy the whole seed, because when you buy them already ground, when it's ground, it's being exposed to light and temperatures, so it's going to be oxidized a lot faster. So your shelf life goes way down, and you have no idea how long it's been sitting on the shelf before you purchase it. So it's better to grind if you're going to grind your seeds, to grind them with like maybe a 3 days worth portion if you have the time. To tell a busy mother to do that, it's like, forget it. So again, you pick your battles. And when you chew your food, you're technically grinding your food. Okay, so you're processing your food as it's going down. So when we think about processed foods in that way, as long as you can recognize it, so your black beans, you can recognize your black beans. When you look at that ingredient list, is it 100% black beans? or is it black beans and a bunch of other things? And ground nuts and seeds is okay. Just make sure you store them, in a refrigerator, cool, dark place. But great questions. Any other questions you guys might have? Yes.
Your opening statement was when you cut something, it loses its solubility.
Yes, that's right.
That carrot,
Yep.
if you skin it,
Yep.
Bugs Bunny's still alive. I don't think he ever skinned the carrots. But is skinning a carrot, does that have an effect on, like apples and applesauce, taking that fiber coating off?
Well, yeah, you are taking off a coating. You
Okay.
are.
So,
Yeah. I mean, you're still getting fiber from the carrot, but ideally, just wash the outside of the carrot and eat the carrot whole. But the moment you take an orange or a bell pepper and you slice it with a knife, you're cutting through molecular structures. You break it open, it gets exposed to light. So, and heat and room temperature. So, the more you process a food, you are technically losing nutrients by each slice, that you do on the counter and the juices that go out and, technically. But the take-home message is don't worry so much about that. I would rather you go and eat whole foods or foods in general. And if you want to shave your carrots, you can, but we typically don't. I mean, we do sometimes, especially if we're going to do like a shaved carrot in a salad. But more than likely, we'll just wash the outside and eat it like Bugs Bunny. Yeah. And people go and they go into their gardens and pull it right out of the ground and maybe just dust off the dirt a little bit and eat it. We're a little afraid of germs, and there's some argument for that. But yeah, eat it with the skin.
I don't
You
want to
get,
be,
you get more fiber that way.
I want to be like everybody else.
You want to be like everybody
You
else.
are
All right.
not
Well,
like
if you want to peel your carrots,
the
peel
others.
them.
And when I cut at night in the dark.
Okay, so he's not invited anymore.
Pat's already tried that, right?
You are not like the
Well,
others.
let me add to Ted's question,
Yeah.
Doctor.
Yeah.
All things in moderation.
Yes.
Oh, good point.
Give me an example, if you would, please, of a good processed food.
Well, I kind of rattled off the black bean dips and things like that. This black bean spaghetti is a processed food technically, but I'd rather you eat that than if you've got celiac disease or you're gluten sensitive to have the whole wheat grain pasta, right? I think my parting comment to that's going to be, how do you feel after pizza, and how do you feel after? I'm trying to think of going down the aisle, the frozen food section in those boxes,
Sure.
But a lot of those meals, when you ask that question, how do I feel after this?
Well, I'll answer that one right offhand. Pizza to me with pepperoni is a no-no.
We just don't eat it.
I don't.
He's up all
it
night.
doesn't agree with my
Oh,
stomach.
and the body expels it or does what it wants to do with it. That's
Precisely.
not
So
right.
if we order pizza, which is very infrequent, it's going to be with probably chicken or even shrimp or something such as that.
Yeah.
So probably a bad example of pizza.
Yeah. Okay. So let me see if I can think of something. So if you guys have an idea of like a processed food, a cheeseburger. Okay. Well,
Okay.
the hamburger, to go in from like the beef itself and then grinding it. I mean, that's super processed. But I'm
Yeah.
going to say this with burgers. I would love for you to have a homemade burger as opposed to going out and buying a burger at a fast food restaurant because of the oils they use, whatever else is going into that. So this is an example of, okay, from a whole food perspective, if I make the burger at home and it's fresh and it's with a meat that I know and trust, nitrite-free, organic, grass-fed and all that, whereas if you go out, that beef, you have no idea where it's coming from, and you have no idea what oils it's been, right?
Sure.
So in terms of the whole food cooking, I think what I would encourage more is the more you go out into the community and you're eating, the less you're likely to see what's going into it. And then also when you're eating, the more real it seems. Okay, like Twinkies and I don't know, muffins and cookies, and, But you can make cookies actually with whole grains, and so it can be a really healthy cookie.
Yes.
It's a complicated question. I think I'd have to take you through a grocery store. But the further away from the farm, the less real the food seems, the less likely it's going to be ideal for you. But in moderation, life happens. You're on a really long road trip, or things happen in life, and it's not going to be perfect. But 80% of the time, if you can encourage your lifestyle to be more towards the whole food perspective, the better. So.
Now, let's go back, if I may, please.
Yep.
To your nuts.
He's not invited either.
I have heard this story for our 500 years of
No,
marriage.
we love it.
So,
No, it's good. It's good.
See what I have to deal with?
You are what you eat, and I see what he's been eating.
That's it.
on the subject of nuts, legumes, etc.,
Yeah.
what happens when you eat too many of them?
Well, yeah. So when you're not used to fiber, you can bloat up, and you can, have some. You can either get constipated or you can get loose stool, depending on your presentation. And so, what happens when you eat too many of them? That's kind of what happens. You're gonna get kind of the reverse effect of a little exacerbation, right? So people who aren't used to eating this way,
So you can get too much good food.
you can drink too much water and die
I
from that.
agree.
You actually can die from overhydration.
Yes.
You can die from dehydration. So in life, there's a balance, right? And there's a reason why they say serving size here, just so you know. There are some guidelines in here on do not eat whole bags, or else you won't feel good. You'll bloat up probably.
Okay.
Yeah, so look. Look at this. Okay. So, soluble fiber, and if you eat a lot of this, how are you gonna feel, right? You're gonna feel like a,
Sure.
so chia seeds, you can see that it's kind of like that too. So this is a combination of soluble and insoluble, and then your flax seeds. All right. So there you go.
Have you tried the plant burgers at all?
Yes, and that. The only thing I'm going to say, because I have researched this, and all I'll say, go for your black bean burger. You know that it's black beans. It's black beans, and maybe like an egg, or I can't remember what they use for black beans. I can't remember what we do, but because the more you're going into these other burgers, I'm going to not use their names. We can talk about that on the walk, but.
And also, how can we get Trader Joe's right down there?
Yeah. Oh my gosh! Yes, I know. Yes.
Right down there. How can we get them there? It'd be perfect.
Thank you for watching Dr. Lexi Lane with Walk with the Doc.
Hey.
Okay.